Well, God bless you and welcome to Christian Virtual Fellowship, a production of Allegiance to the King. We can be found at allegiancetotheking.org and on Facebook. My name is Raymond Scott. In my last teaching, we read and discussed the first two chapters of the book of Job. Now we will cover, as time allows, Job's complaint in chapter 3, and then a dialogue between him and his three friends. First, a recap of part 1. Job is the greatest man of the East. He is very wealthy, has 10 adult children, is married, and has enjoyed the protection of God Almighty. He is not an Israelite, but worships Yahweh. 3 times he is called blameless, upright, fearing God, and avoiding evil. In heaven, God summons his divine council, the sons of God. Satan arrives with them. God points out to Satan, my servant Job, as a righteous man. In front of the divine council, Satan challenges God's belief in Job. Satan says that if God took away all the blessings, Job would curse him to his face. To preserve his honor and not sparing Job's happiness, God drops away the protective fence around all Job has. Satan attacks. Job loses his wealth and children. Job stays faithful. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's Job's position. Satan again challenges God, and God trusts Job to stay true. Satan is allowed to inflict burning boils on Job's skin from head to toe. 3 friends come to console him, and the 4 men sit quietly together for a week. After a week of silence, bitterness and resentment boil to the surface. Afterward, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. And Job said, "May the day on which I was to be born perish, as well as the night which said, 'A boy is conceived.' May that day be darkness. May God above not care for it, nor light shine on it. May darkness and black gloom claim it. May a cloud settle on it. May the blackness of the day terrify it. As for that night, may darkness seize it. May it not rejoice among the days of the year. May it not come into the number of the months. Behold, may that night be barren. May no joyful shout enter it. May those curse it who curse the day, who are prepared to disturb Leviathan. May the stars of its twilight be darkened. May it wait for light, but have none. And may it not see the breaking dawn, because it did not shut the opening of my mother's womb or hide trouble from my eyes. Why did I not die at birth, come out of the womb and pass away? Why were the knees there in front of me, and why the breasts that I would nurse? For now I would have lain down and been quiet. I would have slept then. I would have been at rest with kings and counselors of the earth, who rebuilt ruins for themselves, or with rulers who had gold, who were filling their houses with silver, or like a miscarriage which is hidden, I would not exist, as infants that never saw light. There the wicked cease from raging, and there the weary are at rest. The prisoners are at ease together. They do not hear the voice of the taskmaster. The small and the great are there, and the slave is free from his master. Why is light given to one burdened with grief, and life to the bitter of soul, who long for death, but there is none, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who are filled with jubilation and rejoice when they find the grave. Where is light given to a man whose way is hidden, and whom God has shut off? For my groaning comes at the sight of my food, and my cries pour out like water. For what I fear comes upon me, and what I dread encounters me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet, and I am not at rest, but turmoil comes. Well, as we just read, Job questions the goodness of life and even creation itself. God called his creation very good, but to Job it's all futile or worse, bad. For example, God separated the light from the darkness, as stated in Genesis 1:3. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. But for Job, may the day on which I was to be born perish, as well as the night. May that day be darkness. May God above not care for it, nor light shine on it. May darkness and black gloom claim it. May a cloud settle on it. May the blackness of the day terrify it. The pain Job experienced was very isolating. No one around him suffered as he did. No one could really understand. He cursed the day of his birth. In Genesis 1:14, God said, "Let there be lights, serve as signs and for seasons and for days and years." But for Job, as for that night of his birth, may darkness seize it. May it not rejoice among the days of the year. May it not come into the number of the months. Job cries that life is no good. Why is light given to one burdened with grief, and life to the bitter of soul, who long for death, but there is none, and dig for it more than for hidden treasures, who are filled with jubilation and rejoice when they find the grave? But God saw the world he made and said it was very good. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on earth, and to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from darkness. And God saw that it was good. For Job, may the stars of its twilight of the day of his birth be darkened. May it wait for light, but have none. And may it not see the breaking dawn, because it did not shut the opening of my mother's womb or hide trouble from my eyes. You see how he not only cursed the day of his birth, but also condemned creation itself? Doesn't God know what he is doing? And if he does, why live? Creation seems like a cruel joke. Death is better than life. That's how Job felt. Up to this time, life had been very good for Job. When the Almighty was still with me and my children were around me, when I went out to the gate of the city, when I took my seat in the public square, the young men saw me and hid themselves, and the old men arose and stood. The leaders stopped talking and put their hands on their mouths, and the voices of the prominent people were hushed, and their tongues stuck to their palates. For when an ear heard, it called me blessed. And when an eye saw, it testified in support of me. Because I saved the poor who cried for help, and the orphan who had no helper. The blessing of the one who was about to perish came upon me, and I made the widow's heart sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a headband. I was eyes to those who were blind, and feet to those who could not walk. I was a father to the poor, and I investigated the case which I did not know. I broke the jaws of the wicked and rescued the prey from his teeth. To me, they listened and waited, and they kept silent for my advice. After my words, they did not speak again, and my speech dropped on them. They waited for me as for the rain, and opened their mouths as for the late rain. I smiled at them when they did not believe, and they did not look at my kindness ungraciously. But as we know, life has become unbearable to him, and he isn't going to be quiet about it any longer. What follows is a long dialogue between him and his three miserable comforters, who up to this time have been silently there for him. For the sake of time, I'm going to summarize the comments of Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, as well as Job's responses. Each of Job's friends suggest, and later insist, that Job has sinned and therefore had brought these disasters and sickness upon himself. Traditional religion in the ancient Near East had a cause and effect element. This is called retribution theology. Retribution theology holds that people are treated by God based on how they behave. I found a definition of retribution theology at compellingtruth.org. And it goes on to say on that website, if you have sickness, it's because of God's punishment for your misdeeds. If you become wealthy, it's because you please God. This simplistic interpretation of our relationship with God is not based on the truth of the Bible. Jesus addressed this mistaken idea several times. In John 9, his disciples asked about who sinned to cause a man to be born blind. Jesus told them it was not because of the sin of the man or his parents, but for purposes God had to glorify his Son. At another time, he referenced the tragic death of more than a dozen people to make the point that circumstances are not a good indication of God's punishment. And then he quotes Jesus, or those 18 on whom the tower of Siloam fell and killed them. Do you think they were worse offenders than all the others who lived in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Responding to his friends, Job's friends, wisdom of retribution, Job points out the wicked do prosper. Why do the wicked still live, grow old, and also become very powerful? Their descendants endure with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, and the rod of God is not on them. His ox mates without fail, his cow calves and does not miscarry. They send out their boys like the flock, and their children dance. They sing with a tambourine and harp, and rejoice at the sound of the flute. They spend their days in prosperity, and suddenly they go down to Sheol. Yet they say to God, go away from us. We do not even desire the knowledge of your ways. Who is the Almighty that we should serve him? And what would we gain if we plead with him? Behold, their prosperity is not in their hand. The advice of the wicked is far from me. In an attempt to console his friend, Eliphaz tells Job, remember now, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the upright destroyed? According to what I have seen, those who plow wrongdoing and those who sow trouble harvest it. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they come to an end. To validate his belief, Eliphaz tells him that a spirit revealed it. Now a word was brought to me secretly, and my ear received a whisper of it. Amid disquieting thoughts from visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on people, dread came upon me and trembling, and made all my bones shake. Then a spirit passed by my face, the hair of my flesh stood up. Something was standing still, but I could not recognize its appearance. A form was before my eyes. There was silence, then I heard a voice. Can mankind be righteous before God? Can a man be pure before his maker? He puts no trust even in his servants, and he accuses his angels of error. How much more those who live in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust? So a spirit told Eliphaz that human beings cannot be righteous or pure before God. The spirit said God doesn't trust his servants. Yet, God boasted of Job as, quote, my servant, quote, blameless and upright in chapters 1 and 2. God is trusting Job to prove Satan and now Eliphaz wrong. Eliphaz isn't an Israelite, and so may be unaware of God's plan to elevate mankind to glory and honor. The psalmist wrote, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels, and you have crowned him with glory and honor. You have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet. Psalm 8. Satan and the spirit and Eliphaz himself questions the wisdom of God to put all things under mankind's feet. Can man be righteous? Eliphaz asked Job, call now, is there anyone who will answer you? And to which of the holy ones will you turn? Eliphaz suggests that Job turn to one of the holy ones for help. Who are the holy ones? It is not said, but perhaps they are the sons of God who listened as Satan challenged God's wisdom about Job. Convinced of Job's guilt, Eliphaz reminds Job that God disciplines his people. Behold, happy is the person whom God disciplines. So do not reject the discipline of the Almighty. But Job has done nothing to deserve what has happened to him. For a second time, Eliphaz questions whether man is able to be righteous. He quotes the spirit that visited him. What is man that he would be pure, or he who is born of a woman that he would be righteous? Behold, he has no trust in his holy ones, and the heavens are not pure in his sight. How much less one who is detestable and corrupt, a person who drinks malice like water? Referring to Job, obviously. Eliphaz grows so impatient with Job's insistence of innocence that he heatedly argues, can a strong man be of use to God, or a wise one be useful to himself? Is it any pleasure to the Almighty if you are righteous, or gain if you make your ways blameless? Is it because of your reverence that he punishes you, that he enters into judgment against you? Is your wickedness not abundant? And is there no end to your guilty deeds? For you have seized pledges from your brothers without cause, and stripped people naked. You have given the weary no water to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. You have sent widows empty, and the strength of orphans have been crushed. Well, none of this is true. God called Job upright and blameless. Bildad is the second friend. He shares the same theology of retribution. Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert what is right? If your sons sinned against him, then he turned them over to the power of their wrongdoing. If you are pure and upright, surely now he will stir himself for you and restore your righteous estate. Like the self-righteous Pharisees around the cross of Jesus Christ, Bildad tells Job that if he is truly righteous, then God will save him. Bildad consistently, if ignorantly, accuses Job's sons of sin as well. Bildad continues with the traditional view of God being just a result of being, let me read that over again. Bildad continues with the traditional view of God being just as a result of cause and effect. Please inquire of past generations and consider the things searched out by their fathers. Will they not teach you and tell you and bring forth words from their minds? Can papyrus grow tall without a marsh? Can the rushes grow without water? In other words, all suffering comes from being sinful. Bildad goes on. Behold, God will not reject a person of integrity, nor will he help evildoers. Well, that, of course, implies that if God doesn't help you, well, you must be an evildoer. Finally, Bildad reveals his own opinion of mankind. How then can mankind be righteous before God? Or how can anyone who is born of woman be pure? If even the moon has no brightness and the stars are not pure in his sight, how much less man, that maggot, and a son of man, that worm? Isn't this Satan's argument to God, that mankind is not worthy to be crowned with glory and honor and put at God's right hand of majesty? That's what Satan wants God, you, and I to believe. The third friend is Zophar, who warns Job to repent of being wicked. If wrongdoing is in your hand, put it far away, and do not let malice dwell in your tents, for the eyes of the wicked will fail, and there will be no escape for them, and their hope is to breathe their last. Despite all three friends insisting that somehow Job sinned, there is no sin committed that would warrant any severe punishment as apparently inflicted on Job. In fact, we know from chapters 1 and 2, there hasn't been any sin or punishment involved, but he responds to the accusations levied against him. At first, Job is simply overwhelmed by the loss of family, wealth, and health. Let me just die, he says. Oh, that my request might come to pass and that God would grant my hope. Oh, that God would decide to crush me, that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. But it is still my comfort, and I rejoice in unsparing pain, that I have not denied the words of the Holy One. Even while wishing to die at God's hand, Job has the grit to not deny the words of the same God he believes is destroying him. He further responds to accusations of sin. Show me how I've done wrong. Upon further reflection, he sounds more confident. But he knows the way I take. When he, that is God, has put me to the test, I will come out as gold. My foot has held on to his path. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. Job again took up his discourse and said, as God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty, who has embittered my soul, for as long as life is in me and the breath of God is in my nostrils, my lips certainly will not speak unjustly, nor will my tongue mutter deceit. Far be it from me that I should declare you right. Until I die, I will not give up my integrity. I have kept hold of my righteousness and will not let it go. My heart does not rebuke any of my days. Job accuses God of treating him as an enemy, even in his dreams. Therefore, I will restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul. Am I the sea or the sea monster that you set a guard over me? If I say, my couch will comfort me, my bed will ease my complaint, then you frighten me with dreams and terrify me by visions. Citing a portion of Psalm 8, Job turns God's words into an ironic accusation of harassment. What is man that you exalt him and that you are concerned about him? That you examine him every morning and put him to the test every moment? Will you never turn your gaze away from me, nor leave me alone until I swallow my spittle? Have I sinned? What have I done to you, watcher of mankind? Why have you made me your target, so that I'm a burden to myself? It occurs to Job that he might go to court with God, but then dismisses it. It's too overwhelming. And who would be the judge? In truth, I know that this is so. But how can a person be in the right with God? If one wished to dispute with him, he could not answer him once in 1,000 times. Wise in heart and mighty in strength, who has defied him without harm? How then can I answer him and choose my words before him? For though I were right, I could not answer. I would have to implore the mercy of my judge. If I called and he answered me, I could not believe that he was listening to my voice. If it is a matter of power, behold, he is the strong one. And if it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Though I am righteous, my mouth will condemn me. Though I am guiltless, he will declare me guilty. I am guiltless. I do not take notice of myself. I reject my life. It is all one. Therefore I say, he destroys the guiltless and the wicked. For he is not a man as I am, that I may answer him, that we may go to court together. There is no arbitrator between us. Who could place his hand upon us both? Let him remove his rod from me, and let not the dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak and not fear him. But I am not like that in myself. Finally, Job decides that he does want his day in court with God Almighty, both as the accused and the judge. How else can he get out of this mess? But I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to argue with God. Though he slay me, I will hope in him. Nevertheless, I will argue my ways before him. This also will be my salvation, for a godless person cannot come before his presence. Listen carefully to my speech, and let my declaration fill your ears. Behold now, I have prepared my case. I know that I will be vindicated. Who could contend with me? For then I would be silent and die. Only two things I ask, you do not do to me. Then I will not hide from your face. Remove your hand from me, and may the dread of you not terrify me. Then call, and I will answer. Or let me speak, then reply to me. How many are my guilty deeds and sins? Make known to me my wrongdoing and my sin. Why do you hide your face and consider me your enemy? For you write bitter things against me and make me inherit the guilty deeds of my youth. So even while complaining about God's injustice, Job starts to think about what court against God would look like. Oh, that I knew how to find him, that I might come to his home. I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would learn the words which he would answer and perceive what he would tell me. Would he contend with me by the greatness of his power? No, surely he would pay attention to me. There the upright would argue with him, and I would be free of my judge forever. I have not failed the command of his voice, of his lips. I have not failed the command of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. Job is confident that God would pay attention to him and free him from the misery. He is confident because he has not failed the command of God's lips. He treasured God's words more than food. He knows that once God sits as judge, he will be fair to Job. But at the same time, Job is terrified at being before the Almighty. Therefore, I would be terrified at his presence. When I consider this, I am frightened of him. It is God who has made my heart faint, and the Almighty who has terrified me. After so much dialogue with his three friends, Job provides us with a statement, a poem. He first writes about how hard it is to find and mine from the earth precious metals like gold and silver. Then he writes about how much harder it is to find wisdom. But where can wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Mankind does not know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. The ocean depth says, it's not in me. And the sea says, it's not with me. Pure gold cannot be given in exchange for it, nor can silver be weighed as its price. Where then does wisdom come from? And where is this place of understanding? It is hidden from the eyes of every living creature and concealed from the birds of the sky. Abaddon and Death say, with our ears we have heard a report of it. God understands its ways, and he knows its place. For he looks to the ends of the earth. He sees everything under the heavens. When he imparted weight to the wind and assessed the waters by measure, when he made a limit for the rain and a course for the thunderbolt, then he saw it and declared it. He established it and also searched it out. And to mankind, he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding. Well, I don't think we can improve on the last few words of that poem. So what have we learned so far? Job's friends haven't been much help, unless they have been an iron sharpening iron. By accusing him of different sins, Job's resolve to hold on to his righteousness is strengthened. He doesn't doubt his own integrity. Job is a strong character, and he is starting to bounce back. He has a plan to confront God and demand justice. He is confident that he is innocent of any wrongdoing, so severe as to cause the losses he is enduring. He has treasured God's words and obeyed. He knows that the disasters come from God, and he wants to hold God accountable. Yet he trusts God, is terrified of him, and believes God will be a fair and impartial judge. His friends' attacks condemn mankind's destiny before God. Can man be righteous? Can mankind be worthy of glory and honor? Praise God we can through Jesus Christ our Lord. How Job manages to bring God to court and what God's response is to Job's accusations, we will cover in the next episode of the book of Job. Thank you for listening. Now I'll stop sharing the screen and I'll open it up for comments. Dustin Smith.
Hi, Ray. Can you hear me?
I can now. Thank you.
Okay, good. First of all, thanks for sharing. I don't think it's very easy to share on the book of Job because it's very complex. There's a lot of words, and I think the number of slides on your slideshow indicate that your slideshow is bigger than any of the ones I've ever done. So that kind of shows how much work goes into Job. I say that to commend you. One thing I think I don't think there's an easy answer to this question, but I think it's good for us to start thinking about, is that you spent an awful lot of time contrasting Job's behavior with his so-called friends who concluded that Job was being punished due to some sort of retributive theology, which you rightly said is not biblical. So you said, okay, he was not being attacked by Satan or punished for these reasons, but you actually didn't say why the bad things were happening to him. And I find that for a lot of people, when it comes to reading Job, they either forget to answer that question, or when they think about the answer to the question based on the first 2 chapters of Job, the answer is so uncomfortable they don't want to admit it. So I'm curious as to if you have settled on a particular reason.
Well, and that's why I mentioned Psalm 8. In fact, I mentioned it both in part 1 and now in part 2. And I've read commentaries by both rabbis and Christians, and I didn't see anything about Psalm 8, but that is that man is made a little lower than the angels, but he is crowned with glory and honor. Well, of course, Jesus Christ is crowned with glory and honor, and it is our hope that we are too in the resurrection. But right now we are made a little lower than the angels. This is my impression, and I don't have it tattooed on my heart or anything, and so I'm willing to hear any other suggestions, but that all of this is being done before the sons of God, that the divine council listened both times to the challenge of Satan to God. God took the initiative here. He first asked Satan, "Where have you been?" And then he says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" And God did that twice, once in chapter 1 and once in chapter 2. And then all this is done with an audience. And the audience is in heaven, not on earth. And first of all, Satan challenges God's opinion or belief and trust in Job, calling Job my servant. And so with Satan's challenge, God could not really back down on that. God had to step forward and say, "Oh yeah, you don't think Job is so great? Well, I'll prove it." And Satan at the same time comes out and says, "Well, he wouldn't be so great if you weren't rewarding him and protecting him all the time. He is just Job is just in it for the goodies. He's just in it for the money and for the good life." And so what God does is give Job, and Job is representing all of mankind, at the opportunity to show that when stripped of every blessing, man is still able to have trust and faith in God, even when angry and upset with God, even when we suffer unrighteously, unfairly, like Jesus Christ did. We're able to hang on to our faith that in the end, all will pan out, that God is faithful and we have to be faithful too. So I think that the book calls for us to have a gritty, never say die type of faith, no matter whatever happens to us. And that all of this is being done in front of the sons of God, who were given the nations back in Deuteronomy 32:8, where the nations were given to the sons of God, which in the King James and other standard texts is translated as sons of Israel. But both the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Septuagint both show that instead it's not sons of Israel. Israel didn't exist back
It's angels
in the time. Yeah. So I'm mixing the divine council idea with the idea of Job.
Well,
And
can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I? Because I feel like my question has kind of expanded to you to be more of an application of the book, but I just kind of want to make sure that, because that you said what I think the answer is, but it's an answer that I think in reality is a little bit uncomfortable, which is that the reason why Job suffered was because God made a bet with Satan.
Yeah.
Okay. Now
Yeah.
here's the thing. I don't find that pastorally is a good answer to tell people. And here's another thing. I don't think that is an answer that's ever given in the New Testament. So,
Well, is an answer given in the New Testament?
well, there are a variety of answers in the New Testament, but again, this is the difficulty of Job is that why would a book like this be written? Which, by the way, doesn't mention anything about the law of Moses, doesn't mention anything about the temple, doesn't mention anything about the priesthood. There's no indication that Job or any of his friends are Israelites or Jews.
That's right.
Yeah, and so I think I think that's deliberate. I think that's
It is.
it's trying to interpret things outside of not responding to the covenant. It's interpreting things in light of how might a pagan understand these things, but also it is a part of the Jewish scriptures. So it's I mean, obviously the Jews are going to be reading it and trying to interpret it. But since Job was probably by all internal data written after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple, and the Israelites were exiled, and the Davidic kingship was temporarily suspended, and the temple was destroyed, and all that stuff. Questions, of course, of theodicy, of hey, how come bad things are happening, was a real question on their mind. But I wanted to say, like, I think it's good for us to really acknowledge what seems to be the simple and unavoidable truth, which is that the answer is given in the first two chapters. The figure of Job suffered because God made a bet with Satan. But I don't think that is something that is meant to be applied to our life.
No, I certainly don't. I would not suggest that at all. And I'll be covering that in part 3, when God responds and how he responds to Job's accusations. But I'm not really prepared to go into that. And
that's okay. It's obviously a complex subject. That's the point. Is that it's well, it seems very simple. The simple answer actually raises a lot more questions that take more time to explore, assuming I even have the answer to that, which I'm not even claiming that I do.
Well, one thing that a few years back, I read a little bit about a book about how God is not tamed. God is untamed. Well, God's not an animal. God is God, and is far more wise and all that. But it's with the idea that perhaps our theologies try to squeeze God into some sort of a box, and that God is really just not going to be there, not going to fit into any box that we have. That he is Almighty God and he will do as he sees fit. And he called Job my servant. He called and Jesus, of course, was God's servant as well. And Jesus suffered, unfairly. But to say that, well, it would be a complete overstatement to say that all suffering is caused by God or by the devil. That is not the message of Job, and I haven't read anybody that interprets it as such. But I think that the message of faithfulness is overriding, and that our response while suffering is to stay true and not budge.
Right, no doubt there. I think that's I don't think anybody would argue with that. So anyway, I just thought it was a good question for us to be wrestling with, on top of all the difficult poetry and chapters, whatever, 3 through 48 or however many chapters there were. Anyway.
There's 42 chapters, and let's see, 39 of them are poetry, and they're beautiful poetry, and I encourage everyone to read it. John, you have a comment?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, thought it was interesting, your highlight of, I forget which of the three comforters, miserable comforters, was talking about this, but the one that was talking about having gotten this idea of this, what do you call it, retributive theology or whatever, from a spirit. And I thought that was really interesting. I've read Job a number of times. I don't remember that standing out to me before, that here he is, getting his bad theology from a spirit. And then you think about what Paul says in the New Testament, that bad theologies are coming, and they're going to be coming from bad spirits.
Yeah.
Doctrines of demons. And I thought, wow, that's really, really interesting. I think that's probably something that would be worth further investigation. Anyway, that was really interesting to me. The second thing I wanted to point something out. This was in response to the quote that you had quoted from that website. And there was one piece of it that where they were talking about John 9.
Yeah.
And the man who was born blind. And I wanted to point something out. I know I've shared this before, but I don't know. It's been a long time since I've shared this, and I don't know if everybody is aware of this. The typical way that people take that little episode in John 9 is the way that quote was, which is the idea that, the disciples say, who sinned that this man was born blind, him or his parents? And then Jesus's response is, neither of them sinned. And the way that it typically reads is, but the reason he was born blind is so that, essentially so that I could come along and heal him and glorify God, right? In other words, God is being blamed for this man being born blind. And the reason that people read it that way is because of the way it's punctuated. So if you read it in John 9, verse 3, Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, but it was so that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must carry out the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So it just reads like, the reason he's blind is because God, he was made blind so that the works of God might be displayed in him, right? And so, but the punctuation didn't exist, right? It's not 100% of the time that you can't be rock solid about punctuation. You can a lot of the time be correct, but punctuation is always interpretive, because punctuation didn't exist in the original writings. And so there's a very different way of punctuating this statement by Jesus that makes it say something completely different and doesn't blame God for this situation, but makes the rest of what Jesus said make more sense. So this is how you can punctuate it, and it changes dramatically. Jesus answered, it was neither that this man sinned nor his parents, period. End of sentence. New sentence. But so that the works of God might be displayed in him, comma, we must carry out the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. So if you punctuate it that way, what it says is that Jesus says this guy was not born blind because of anybody's sin. But look, guys, he's blind. And it behooves us to carry out the works of God and display the works of God in him while we are in the world, because that is what God has commissioned us to do. Well, that's dramatically different. And it doesn't make God into some sort of, he's going to make somebody blind so that later on he can heal them so that he gets glory for that. Well, if you or I did that, we'd go to jail. and it's those kind of things that people will read sometimes and hear Christians say and think, wow, I have no interest in that God. And it's understandable why they would do that. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, I'm not saying that I'm definitely right about that way of punctuating it. Maybe it is right the way that it is. But to me, it makes more sense to say that Jesus wasn't putting the blame on anyone, and that he was making a statement that they needed to do something about it, bring about God's glory and justice in the world by being lights. So there you go.
Inti, do you have something to say?
Yes. Okay, I'm just writing this down. So it's actually a kind of an idea that Dustin was kind of trying to answer, like why would God bet with Satan? And I kind of just thought of this because I'm trying to make sense of this. I want to know your guys' input. I had to write this stuff down to kind of keep my head straight, because it doesn't seem normal on the surface, and I had to write down, I'm like, Satan is not in God's kingdom. When he walks through there, like in Ephesians, it talks about how we fight against evil heavenly entities, and so I had to write down, I was like, Satan is not in God's kingdom, and he's the deceiver. So I'm wondering, who says that Satan is not being sarcastic about how Job could be inflicted? And I'll read it like this. I'll quote verses 9-11. Then Satan answered Yahweh, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge about him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land." And now here, I think he might be sarcastic about how Job could be inflicted, like with quotes, but quote, "Put forth your hand now and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you face to face." I mean, curse you to your face, sorry. And I could see how that would actually make harmony with this book, because Satan is the god of this world. So if he's saying put forth your hand, well, neither of them are in each other's kingdom. Duh. Wouldn't it make sense? I mean, that just seems logical to me. How could Satan and God be in agreement? In their kingdoms have darkness has nothing to do with light has nothing to do with darkness. And with regards, Satan is the god of this world. He can make people as wealthy as the top billionaires in the world. He can cause genocides and well,
let me respond to you, Inti.
Sure.
And I appreciate your comment. And just like there aren't any punctuation in the Hebrew, we don't, at least I'm not able, because I don't read Hebrew, to be able to catch the tone of how the words are spoken. Now, maybe those among us who read Hebrew are able to do that. But I just take the words at their face value. And, as was pointed out earlier, Job and his friends are not Israelites. They are outside of the covenant, but all four of them do worship Yahweh. And so I think that's significant. And then when we take actually what God says about Job, that he is, quote, my servant, that tells me that Job and God have a relationship. So to say that Job is not in the kingdom, I think would be incorrect.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Yeah. Now Satan, his called, the word Satan means accuser, and it's actually a title. It's not his proper name. Like my proper name is Ray. Well, that spirit's name is not Satan. he is called the Satan. And the accuser is like the prosecuting attorney. And so apparently he has some role to play, although we certainly don't appreciate it. So I can't speak to whether or not he has a that he has a role in God's plans, but it's an interesting thought that you raise.
I mean, Satan being the god of of this world, and it doesn't have to mean the like Lucifer or whatever. I'm just saying in general, their kingdom is the god of this world, however you want to look at it, Satan, because
Right.
in First John. And so I can see how they can do all sorts of crazy things. They can make people as wealthy as possible, as broke as possible. And if someone isn't righteous before God, I mean, God doesn't really, I don't know what the limits are of what God can and can't do, but clearly God was on Job's side.
Yeah.
And we really don't know about his children, who died. So maybe they weren't righteous. I have no idea. But what I'm trying to say is that when the adversary says, "Put forth your hand now and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face," I think that could be taken sarcastically, because otherwise we are just saying that God operates this way where he makes bets with Satan to,
Well, kind of irrelevant in the end, because then after the conversation goes on, he says, "Do what you want with them." So basically, Satan's saying you do it, but then God's like, "You're allowed to do it." Right?
well, that's because
So
he's the god of, he's the god of this world.
Yeah.
That's why. That's
Well, and
the point I was making.
yeah, and as the God of this world, he caused the whirlwind to bring down the house on the children and kill them. And he inspired the bad people, to steal the camels and what have you. And he also caused the meteorite, or the ball of fire, to come out of the sky and burn up all the sheep and the men. So yeah, we know that the adversary has his tools.
I just think he's very capable of being sarcastic. Okay.
Okay, well, that's your point you're making. Okay, well, let's go from there and let's have George speak up.
Hey, Ray, it's a great job.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. I've been groping around looking for the words to use for what you coined today. I don't know if you coined it or what, but you told me this about retribution theology, and that's something I've been looking for. Hearing somebody coined that phrase, for at least 15 years, and I'll tell you right now, I am a victim of retribution theology, and I had two very life-threatening experiences in my life, and what I got from them was my church family. Instead of coming and praying for me and asking me to help out, they made sermons out of me. And, they said God was punishing George. And I heard that twice. And both times I heard it, it really put a heavy weight on me. And instead of lifting me up, it put me down and made my times a little harder. But I ended up forgiving those people for what they had said and what they had pondered or what they had imagined. But I'm really grateful to you for coming up with that phrase. I don't know where you came up with it or whatever, but retribution theology, it really exists, because there's whole churches out there that are running on retribution theology.
Yes, there are. And I'm ashamed to say that I fell for it once in my life, and probably failed God in one instance, because I kind of got sucked into that thinking. And so, yeah, but
All right, we all do once in a while. And the other point I wanted to make was, I thought you made a really good point about Satan being an accuser and whatnot. And I would probably have to say that Satan is an adversary of men. But that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Well, thank you, George. Thank you for sharing that. Steve and Phyllis.
This has really been a good teaching. This whole book of Job is just so sweet and active. And but when it first starts out and it says that Job was righteous and that he was blameless, and but blameless doesn't necessarily mean you've got everything correct. God's not blaming you. It's like being righteous. It's not because of the things I necessarily do, my behavior or don't do. God is the one that declares us righteous. And this book is the kind of book, it seems like the further we get into it, the more we start to recognize that Job does have some problems going on. And when I look at him and his friends, this might sound weird, but they almost seem like different sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
And the reason I say this is his friends thinks he's being punished, that retribution, you know, what we were just talking about, that he's being punished because of unrighteous acts. Job, on the other hand, thinks he has been righteous and being treated unfairly because of his righteous acts. It's all about righteousness, but they're both being related to works. And it's very, very easy to fall into that, where we get this works mentality. We've been studying and learning for weeks now, years really, how righteousness does not come by works. God declares us righteous. And when we trust in him, that's what makes us righteous. And so as we'll continue to go through this book, I do see a problem that Job had. And I think it's so easy in terms of how we apply it to us today. It is so easy to fall over into this works mentality, thinking it's about moral behavior. Now, I'm not saying don't behave morally. When God has our heart, that moral behavior will come out of it, but it's not the works that save us. It's a gift from God because he declares us righteous. It is so much in this book, and thank you.
I just like to add one thing at the head is that, you know, Job and these three guys is his friends. And, you know, with us, we tend to be with people that think like we think. So I would say that Job and his three friends had the same basic theology. And Job was doing everything right. I mean, he started to throw up to God as to how many things he's done. He's kept this, he's done everything, and he has. But as believers and Christians, if we say, okay, because I've kept all the law, I'm so good, then God, because I've done this, then he's got to bless me. So we can get off in that kind of that theological thinking as Christians.
Yeah.
And looking at the unmoral folks that I'm more moral than you, but you know, those folks down there, they ain't got it. So we have to be careful about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I included a portion where Job talks about the wicked and how their children dance and play and how they're that they're wealthy and that they're safe in their homes. The wicked are, and yet they don't want anything to do with God. I mean, if this was strictly a world in which God always punished the wicked and always bless the righteous. Well, where would we be? Because we have all sinned. We all fall short of the glory of God. So, and actually, some of this will be addressed in part 3 when God and Job start talking to one another, because I think some of this comes out. But thank you very much. And thank you for being so eloquent, Phyllis. I think that you made some good points. I purposely did not include portions where Job does talk about what I would call minor infractions, what I'd call sins that he committed, but none of the sins that he committed were proportional to the loss that he endured, the loss that he sustained, but the loss of all of his wealth, all of his family, all of even his health. Nothing that he admits to in Job would rightfully amount to that type of punishment. And so I did omit that from my discussion. And so anyway, well, let's hear from Dean. Dean, what do you have to say?
Well, I agree that blameless does not mean there's no fault at all. But I do believe that there is a works of faithfulness to the degree of keeping the terms of the covenant. And I think that's important too. It's not our works per se, it's our obedience and faithfulness to the covenant, to God, and certainly now to Jesus Christ. But I want to share something else that I put in the chat. I'm just going to read this off. So, and this is what I kind of think. Let me get there. I still believe the essence of the entire book is for everyone remaining faithful, regardless of any bad things that might happen to us. Every person will suffer, I think I misspelled that word, in this life, and will be blessed, both of them, because what we do, let's see here, I'm trying to find, good or bad, and Satan is not responsible for all of the bad, but he is our enemy, and he's determined to harm especially those who endeavor to commit to God, and to prosper those who don't commit to God. I think it's a humanly natural thing for anyone of us to complain to some degree when bad things happen. That's just natural, and that's what Job was doing.
Yeah.
And he, to the place where he didn't even want to, he'd rather die, because who wants to put up with that? But he never blamed God in the process. Also, I'm going to say that bad things happen because we're in a fallen world, and that's just where it is. Why was this guy born blind? Because he's in a fallen. Bad things happen, whether you're good or not. My mom was taken from our family because of things that happened. It wasn't because she was bad. Just things happen in the world, and so that's my take on all this.
Okay, thank you very much. We are still recording, and so I would like to invite those who are hearing this on YouTube to subscribe to the Christian Virtual Fellowship channel and to share it with others, to spread the word of the gospel. Thank you very much for listening to us, and God bless. All right, we're done recording. Well, I really appreciate everyone's comments. I thought that they were all well taken and reflected some serious thought. I appreciate what John had to say about the punctuation, which actually it just didn't occur to me to even look at that.
Ray, I think we're still recording though. I don't think it turned off.
Oh, okay. Well, I did. Oh, I guess I